Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to go over a kind of problem I've been having with how I approach deck building in the Rescue Ace deck. As Weiss's Indianapolis, Bolivia, and Richmond, all approach, it's going to be a lot of people's, main focus to figure out how to build this deck effectively and properly. And there's mainly one thing that I wanted to go over, and that is Impulse. It's not as straightforward as it seems as to where this card stands in the deck. And I'll kind of get into the discussion in a bit. Before I continue, though, thank you guys for watching this type of stuff. And if you want to see more discussion, meta videos like this, where you get an inside look at what's going through my mind, then let me know in the comments down below. Or if you have any opinions on this topic, whether they agree with mine or differentiate from mine as well, just leave it down below. And also go check out tsx1.com and use the code potato10. Get 10% off on your sleeves, and for indie, those are almost certainly the sleeves that I'll be using. So yeah, okay, let's get into it. Okay, so this is a very standard-ish looking deck, and ignore the don't look into it too much. This was something I put together quickly for stream as kind of a general template for what a Rescue Ace deck may look like, but it's not like some definitive source you should be looking at. One thing to note, though, when you look at a Rescue Ace deck like this, is your amount of non-engine is actually fairly limited. When you look at the space that you have, as far as your engine goes, between the Diabell Star and the Rescue Ace cards, and at least in what I'm running here, you only have 9 non-engine spaces. And typically when you think of these powerful mid-range type decks that Rescue Ace kind of feels like, you'd often associate having a high non-engine count. So a lot of hand traps or board breakers, almost like a Sprite type deck from building a Pote almost, where you had those kind of options and you could kind of be flexible. And that's really not the case with the way the deck built is here. So going into Indie, I obviously want to see if I can remedy that, see if I can find a different balance for the deck that solves this issue, that I can fit more non-engine in the deck, but obviously something has to give in order to do that. So whenever we're in this spot, we want to just kind of look at our deck again and reevaluate objectively every single card in what it accomplishes, right? We gotta see, is it a card that's an engine requirement, so it's something we're searching and to do something that's just a utility card. Is it a non-engine card? Is it a starter? Is it a necessary brick? And as we classify each of these cards, we have Ash Blossom, we have Diabell Star, which interestingly is an engine card, but also arguably a starter, so a card you could potentially play more of, but for math reasons, you don't have to. Nibiru is non-engine, Airlifter is a starter, Fire Attacker here is a utility card, and obviously you have to decide if that utility card is worth it, because the utility engine type thing, because it's not really important to any specific combos. It's really just use for sometimes you search it can be useful. Fire Engine is about the same, and then you have Hydrant, which is a starter or an engine piece, and Impulse. Now, especially from decks, so many people would be inclined to say it's a starter, but it really doesn't feel like that, because obviously it's a starter, but requiring your opponent to trigger it. Which is like saying Waking the Dragon is a starter because it summons anything from the deck. Now, obviously, that comparison is kind of not the same, because Waking the Dragon requires them to specifically pop, where Impulse requires a monster effect. One is significantly easier to, activate than the other. But Impulse kind of, isn't actually a starter, right? Like, when we draw it in our turn 1, it can contribute to dead hands. So it has to action for us as a utility card, but if it's a utility card, that typically means it's a one-of that you search. So for us to play 3 of this, we'd actually have to feel that this is a card we want to draw, because outside of just being utility search, this is equivalent of being a good non-engine card. Now, I say this because if we think this card is worse to draw than any other non-engine, then we could argue that you should just play 1 of this. And that frees up space, right? And if you're playing 1 of this and these are attachments. Maybe you don't need to play fire attack. You play one for some specific combo requirement still. Like playing around evenly, it's nice to have this in the deck so you can set up this plus this through evenly. Or to help you, push through fields as well. Like if they go IP, you chain impulse. You search impulse, then chain, special engine, whatever. So that would make space in the deck, right? And the purpose there would be you can search impulse and be there. And then the space you get off this, like 3 extra spots, and lend to more non-engine. I'm not saying it has to be Fenrir, it can be anything. The same with the non-engine I have in here. This is just a, look at it in the general in the general way that those cards can be any non-engine cards, right? And in this way, you put non-engine cards. But that operates under the assumption that in any given hand, we'd rather draw Fenrir over Impulse. And I'm not saying that's like true or untrue. That's kind of what players like myself are racking our minds with. We have to figure out if Impulse is good enough, because it's not a starter and it's not really a utility card if we play it at 3. Now, obviously, we have to decide if it is even worth playing at all, if it's a one-of, right? Now, many times when building these type of decks, it's important to find what's fat and what's not. So, if it's necessary, or if you can, trim it out and play perfectly fine without it. There are many cases where these decks have one-of utility cards that you don't have to play in the main deck. You can even just relegate to the side deck for specific spots. Cards like Entailment would be Heartbeat and Crime. Historically, Heartbeat has not been a necessity in the main deck. It only really was, in my opinion, now because you have less good mills, and before when Mystic Mine was legal. But after Mystic Mine was legal, I felt like that card was perfectly fine relegated to the side spot. So there are many one-of cards like that which either don't need to be included or have such a specific purpose that you can just side deck them. So like Impulse is a card that is specifically very impactful versus Noir. Maybe we just relegate it to the side deck. And then at that point, if it's actually better than a non-engine card, you can play 3. So these are the things that kind of, I have to think about. Now obviously, we can talk about the merits to Impulse. So when you're going second as a non-engine, it's a non-engine card, but it is still, a fire engine. I mean, a rescue ace, card. It's a bit weird classifying it like this. But going second, what are the merits? Obviously, if you play Fire Engine, it's kind of nice that it gets your engine going because it can get to Fire Engine and to Airlifter and then to either Emergency or even a Rescue. Rescue is kind of cool because versus like a Noir, you can rescue back the Impulse, which should trigger stuff immediately. They kind of have to bounce it, which you can change with Preventer, and then Preventer can book. So it just uses up the Noir instantly through a single Impulse, which is nice. And if they have to rank up as well with Yeep, then Engine triggers again, and obviously that's really strong. But that's not to say it's just like some insane card is purely either. It has weaknesses. For example, if they have Pretty Memory, they can suck up the engine and the airlifter. So now it's no longer as pressing for them to clear stuff. And in fact, sometimes you're enabling a larger Noir that doesn't require to be yeeped. And if it doesn't require to be yeeped, it means it's way harder to side for, right? Because siding for the yeep is way easier than siding for the Noir, because you can get way more value out of siding stuff like Spellbound, Encore, Book of Moon, Lance. So you could definitely change your side pattern if you want to revolve around that Impulse thing, but it's something we have to be conscious of. You can also decide that you just hold the Impulse if you draw a card like Encore and you just don't let them get to the Noir, or you can decide that, versus if you have like Spellbound, but Encore I guess can be used either way. Yeah. But regardless, Impulse there obviously is used almost like non-engine. It's bolstering our engine for going second, but flip the tables again, you're starting an Impulse in your hand. Unless you have another way to play, it's doing nothing. Now, for its use as a utility card, something you want to search, not hard draw or, use for specific combos, something you can do that's pretty cool is just alert for it, add it to your hand, or if you're playing the Nesh combo that gets Baron, you can make Ice Sold to lead into Baron, and that can search Impulse as a sort of disrupt. And this way, if they're able to break through your field with the Duster and evenly, you're able to keep the Impulse here, and then usually through some other methods that are fairly easy to do, you can also add a Preventer or Engine in the field, something like that, and this gets the second, so you still have the Book of Moon. So, make it not as bad through sort of interrupts, right? Because you're also going to back it up with hopefully like an SP and an IP. And that means you aren't just getting blown out by certain cards. So there is use to it, looking at it from the utility spot as well, even if it's not just or noir. And then sometimes even in more of a more complicated game state, it can be useful to break through fields, right? So like if you're playing in the mirror, it's good when they go IP or they go, Preventer to book. The Chain Impulse, it is meaningful to get some more engine onto the field, and it's a rescue ace card in the grade that you can use for Turbulence or Preventer. It's not meaningless. Same as Rescue Ace, it can be useful if you're able to force out the Caesar, either with the Impulse being normal summoned or just through other means, depending on your non-engine. And they go like Rage Effect. This can be really good to special a fire engine from the deck again here and just get several bodies set up to help push through the field. So in those cases, it definitely could be a card that is worth searching. And in those cases, if it's good enough, maybe we think it's good enough, better than these non-engines. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of talking to myself, but I'm definitely talking to myself, and I'm kind of rambling on. But I hope you guys understand the point of why this isn't an easy matter for players like myself to discuss. We really would like to fit in more non-engine, but we aren't sure if it's the right call to start trimming these type of cards, because it's not straightforward. Where many other cards have a clear defined role, something like Impulse doesn't. It's a non-standard card. It's almost like Havness, but at least Havness you can fuse with it, so you always felt like you still had to play 3 when you could. And Impulse isn't the same in that regard because it only has that first ability, and its normal summon effect, its other effect, again, isn't engine related. So yeah, very interesting. Now, usually when I'm in these type of positions, what I want to do is check the OCG for guidance, right? There's nothing wrong with looking to others for help, for inspiration. It's a very common thing that many players like myself do. So I check Road to the King, which is a great website that shows you OCG tournament data. You can either see the lists they post, or you can go all the way to the bottom where they have their sources, a lot of them time via Twitter, and you check popular deck lists out. This is a great site. We have TCG equivalent called Dual Chronicles, but usually I'm like kept up enough with TCG that this is not as important. But OCG, yes, the data can be helpful. But we notice here that they suffer similar issues to us. Now, if we look here, you'll see that there are indeed 1 Impulse in this deck. So in this type of deck, it is using Impulse to the function that I talked about as a utility card. Which, okay, that's cool. But there are also plenty of lists where it's at 3, and this is played like a more traditional deck. And you can see here the non-engine is fairly low still. And this deck doesn't play Prosperity. That's how they made up for the non-engine, which is weird because non-engine can function as either engine or non-engine, so you typically want to still play it. Granted, it's at 1 in OCG, but still, their non-engine is limited. It's Ash, Maxi, Valor, talents, so 8, 10, cross out 11. And I believe that's all they have, and they're adding to their extra engine count by playing, they are playing Attacker, and they are playing Riccadetto, as an extra, utility card or an engine or engine requirement, because they're, making the combo stronger. And there are many lists like that. If you go through and comb through lists, you may find 3 Impulse to be the most popular. Just because the most popular doesn't mean it's correct. There are enough lists with 1 Impulse, or even with 2 that I've seen, which is another debate. But it's enough to give me doubt that there isn't a clear consensus, even in OCG, on what seems to be the most optimal ratio. Now, obviously, there are other external factors we need to pay attention to, like how the decks are designed in total. This one seems to be more of a Rorodon combo, something we have to keep in mind as we analyze the deck, where this one is a lot more vanilla, but even then still has the some tuner capacity in it. Interesting to note about both decks, though, and this is unrelated to Impulse, is they've gone over 40 cards. So we go back to the original problem here of how do we fit more non-engine in. We take a break from the Impulse thing because, I don't know how I'll be able to answer it, but that could be a thing to do here. Now, if you remember, I talked about math quite a bit, and in some of my decks in the past, I played over 40 cards, and there's a big reason why. And oftentimes, if the math makes more sense about 40, then that's the option to choose. Now, I don't want to get into a huge spiel about percentages right now because I've done it plenty of times. You can check out my video why Heart of the Cards is garbage, and that should maybe provide you with some more understanding. But kind of the goal here is if you could increase the amount of non-engine and the amount of engine in your deck by about equal parts or whatever consistency you want to make it, all you're doing is decreasing the number of bricks in your deck. So the cards that aren't that good, like Extinguish, Contain, the Sinful Spoil, Snake Eye, those cards, the chance of drawing them is all going to drop. And if you add like another Diabell Star in, the quality of your starter may decrease, but if you deem it still worthwhile, if you deem the quality of your starter decreasing a little bit to make up for the lack of chance of drawing these type of cards, then that might be worth it. I mean, it very well can be. If you do that with one Impulse, it means lowering the chance of an Impulse, which is good if we don't think it's a card we really want to draw, but obviously if it is, then we should play 3. Whole big spiel again. But that is the other, I guess, thing we could be doing. So as we look to find more on engine for this deck, those are the two biggest things that are on my mind. And obviously the most controversial one right now seems to be the Impulse thing. How do we make Impulse out in this deck? Is it a 1 of, 3 of, a 2 of, a 0 of? Who knows, right? And the rest of the deck will kind of, alter around it. Yes, your playstyle may have to change based on Impulses, but that's easy enough to do, and you build around what you have. Like, obviously, maybe Fenrir's a 3 means Impulse a 3 kind of conflicts. Same with Nibiru Fenrir. I mean, that's stuff you can figure out on your own, but are things you should still keep in mind. So with those two things in mind, I hope I've given you some direction to building your Rescue decks once Agov comes out. I think there are a couple options, and I'm very curious to see over the next few events how players, attempt to optimize their deck and finding the best deck list. Because right now, while I have ideas, I am far away from anything I am satisfied with. And let me know what you guys think down below. So that's all for now, guys, and I'll see you all next time.